This is not a feel-good story. It's not about trophies, and it's definitely not about national pride. What just happened in Cambridge, Ontario, is something far more dangerous than that. It's a signal that exposes a quiet shift in industrial power that most people, especially in Washington, are not ready to confront. Because when a Toyota plant in Canada wins one of the most prestigious global manufacturing quality awards, it's not just recognition, it's proof. Proof that the assumptions underpinning North American industrial dominance are breaking. For decades, there was an unspoken deal, a default setting. If you were a global manufacturer, if you were deciding where to place your next billion-dollar plant, your default answer was the United States. Not because it was always the best, not because it was always the most efficient, but because it was assumed to be the center of gravity. Canada, Mexico, others, they were complements, supporting players. The United States didn't have to compete. It just had to exist. That era is over. And this Toyota award is the moment the mask slipped. Because here's the part that matters. This wasn't a startup. This wasn't a niche manufacturer. This wasn't a protected domestic market. This was Toyota, the most disciplined manufacturing organization on the planet, operating inside the same integrated North American supply chain, serving the same consumers, under the same corporate umbrella. No excuses, no asterisks, no geopolitical spin, just performance. And the Canadian plant didn't just perform, it dominated. This is what Washington is panicking about, not the award itself, but what it proves. It proves that capital is no longer loyal to flags, it is loyal to systems. And systems are judged by stability, predictability, competence, not slogans, not threats, not televised outrage. Toyota didn't reward Canada because it's nicer. It rewarded Canada because the system works. Let's break that down. The Cambridge plant sits inside an ecosystem with stable labor relations, long-term skills training, predictable regulation, low political volatility, and institutional continuity. That matters more than tax breaks, more than tariffs, more than patriotic speeches. Because when you're investing billions, you're not betting on this quarter. You're betting on the next 30 years. And modern capital hates surprises. This is the part that gets missed. The real loss here isn't a single plant. It's the collapse of an expectation premium. For decades, the US enjoyed a silent advantage. Executives assumed future investments would land there by default, even when costs were higher, even when labor relations were worse, even when infrastructure lagged. That assumption is gone. Now there's a proof point. Same company, same continent, same market, different outcome. And that changes everything. Because now, when a boardroom debates where the next $40 billion goes, Canada is no longer hypothetical. It's a demonstrated alternative. That's what 40B gone really means. Not a canceled deal, not a signed contract ripped up, but a future that quietly shifts direction. No announcement, no press conference, just a decision not made. And those are the most dangerous losses, because they don't trigger alarms, they don't make headlines, but they compound. One plant becomes two, two becomes an ecosystem. And suddenly the center of gravity moves. This is what Washington is reacting to. Not emotionally, structurally. Tariffs, threats, industrial policy theater. These aren't signs of confidence, they're signs of panic. Because pressure is being substituted for planning, noise for competence, disruption for durability, and capital can tell the difference. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Industrial decline is not inevitable. It's chosen. It's the result of prioritizing financial extraction over investment, cost cutting over skill building, short-term optics over long-term systems. Canada didn't win because it tried to beat the US. It won because it didn't break what already worked. Continuity became a competitive advantage. And that's the real clash here. Not countries, not flags, but models of capitalism. One model values patience, skills, institutions, stability. The other values disruption, spectacle, short-term leverage, political theater. For years, the second model coasted on legacy dominance. Now it's being tested, and capital is voting, quietly, relentlessly. This Toyota award didn't create the shift, it revealed it. And once revealed, it can't be unseen. So what happens next? This is where the story stops being abstract and starts becoming unavoidable. Because capital doesn't move emotionally, it moves methodically, quietly, and once it starts shifting direction, it rarely reverses. The Toyota award is not an endpoint. It's a reference point, a data point that future decisions will orbit around. The next time an executive committee meets, the next time a global manufacturer weighs North America against Asia or Europe, the question will no longer be, why Canada? The question will be, why not? And that single change in framing is devastating. For decades, the US benefited from something economists rarely talk about, an assumption premium, the assumption that it was always the safest bet, the assumption that problems would get solved, the assumption that institutions would hold, That premium allowed inefficiency to persist, allowed dysfunction to be tolerated, allowed short-term extraction to masquerade as strategy. But assumption premiums only exist until reality provides a counterexample. Cambridge, Ontario is now that counterexample. Same company, same supply chain, same market, different outcome. And there's no blaming globalization, no blaming China, no blaming labor costs. The comparison is internal, which makes it unforgiving. This is why the political response feels so frantic. Tariffs, threats, ultimatums. These aren't tools of confidence, they're tools of coercion. And coercion is what you reach for when you no longer inspire voluntary commitment. Here's the problem. Capital doesn't respond well to pressure. It responds to incentives and predictability. You can threaten a company into staying, but you can't threaten it into investing its future. And that distinction matters, because factories aren't just buildings. They're commitments, decades-long commitments. When policy becomes volatile, when regulation becomes performative, when leadership changes direction every election cycle, capital adapts by minimizing exposure, not by leaving loudly, but by not arriving. This is the quiet part no one wants to say out loud. The U.S. isn't losing factories. It's losing future factories. And those losses don't show up in headlines. They show up years later as missing ecosystems. Missing suppliers, missing skills. By the time it's obvious, it's already irreversible. Canada didn't steal anything. It didn't outmuscle anyone. It simply offered something increasingly rare. A boring system that works. Stable labor agreements. Continuous training pipelines. Clear regulatory expectations. Low political whiplash. None of that is flashy, but all of it compounds. This is the irony. The most competitive systems today are the least dramatic, and that's why spectacle is such a liability. When politics becomes theater, institutions become unstable. And when institutions become unstable, capital prices in risk. Not moral risk, not reputational risk, operational risk. That's what boardrooms care about. This is why threats backfire. They don't create loyalty, they accelerate diversification. Every tariff threat sends a signal. You are a political tool. And the moment capital realizes that, it starts looking for alternatives. Canada is now a validated alternative. Not because it's perfect, but because it's predictable. And predictability beats perfection. Every time. This is the part Washington can't spin. You can't message your way out of structural disadvantage. You can't bully capital into believing in your institutions. You either build systems that work, or capital leaves quietly. And accountability doesn't arrive in elections. It arrives in balance sheets, years later. Too late to fix. This is why the comparison hurts so much. Same continent, same company, same market, different philosophy, different outcome. One system chose continuity, the other chose disruption. One invested in people, the other optimized for extraction. One protected institutions, the other politicized them. Capital noticed. And here's the hardest truth of all. No one is coming to save a system that refuses to learn. Manufacturing dominance is not a birthright. It's a daily practice. You don't keep it by threatening companies. You keep it by being the best place to operate. That means long-term planning, stable rules, respect for skilled labor, investment in institutions, not press conferences, not slogans, not enemies. This Toyota award didn't change the world, but it revealed it. It revealed that industrial power is no longer inherited. It's earned. And the countries that understand that will quietly absorb the future. The ones that don't will keep shouting until there's no one left listening. This isn't about Canada winning. It's about the U.S. being forced to confront a mirror. And mirrors don't negotiate. They reflect. The question now isn't whether this shift continues. It already has. The question is whether anyone in power is willing to rebuild the systems that capital actually trusts. Because capital has already answered. Quietly, decisively. And it's moving on. If this analysis helped you see what's happening beneath the headlines, like the video, share it, subscribe. Because the most important economic shifts never announce themselves. They just leave evidence behind. And by the time everyone notices, the center of gravity has already moved.